I didn't find out my house had been sold until I checked the mail on a Thursday morning. The kids were still asleep. I had woken up early the way I always did, quietly, carefully, like the house was something fragile that loud movements might break. I made coffee. I stood at the kitchen window in the gray early light and watched a bird land on the fence and then fly away. Then I walked to the mailbox. The letter was from a law firm. The kind of envelope that is heavier than it should be and colder to the touch, somehow, even when the weather is warm. I read it standing at the end of the driveway in my socks. It said that the property at our address had been sold at a foreclosure auction 4 days ago. It said the new owner had the legal right to begin the process of taking possession. It said I had a limited number of days to vacate. I read the letter 3 times. Then I folded it carefully, put it back in the envelope, and went inside. My daughter Sophie was 8. My son Marcus was 6. They were both still sleeping. I could hear the small sounds of the house, the refrigerator hum, the soft creak of the hallway, and underneath all of it, the quiet breathing of 2 children who had no idea. I sat down at the kitchen table and put my hands flat on the surface and tried to think. My name is Diane. I had bought the house in Phoenix 7 years earlier, during a brief period when my life felt stable enough to make a large and permanent decision. I was married then. My husband, Keith, had a steady income from his construction management job. We had talked about the house as a foundation, something real and rooted, a place the children could grow up in, a yard where things could be planted. We moved in the same month Sophie was born. Marcus came 2 years later. For a while, the house was exactly what we had imagined it would be, full of noise and small shoes by the door and drawings on the refrigerator. Then Keith's company lost a major contract. He was laid off. He found work again, but it was inconsistent, freelance projects that came and went without pattern. We fell behind on the mortgage. We caught up. We fell behind again. Then Keith left. Not cruelly. Just, quietly, in stages, the way some people leave. One day he was there and the next he was somewhere else, and the house was mine and the children were mine and the mortgage was mine. I did everything I could. I worked full-time as an administrative coordinator at a dental practice. I picked up extra shifts when they were available. I called the bank and asked about modification programs. I filled out forms. I was told I was being reviewed. I was told to wait. I waited. I kept paying what I could. I thought I was managing. The letter told me I had been wrong. The thing no one explains about foreclosure is how long the silence is before it ends. For months, you receive letters. You call numbers. You are placed on hold. You speak to someone who transfers you to someone else. You are told that your case is being reviewed, that a decision will be made, that someone will follow up. And then one day, without warning, the process that was supposedly still in progress has already concluded. The auction happened. The gavel came down. The new owner has a document with their name on it. You find out afterward. In the mail. In your socks. I called the bank that same morning after I put the kids on the school bus. I was on hold for 22 minutes. When someone answered, I explained who I was and what the letter said. The woman on the phone confirmed it. The property had gone to auction last Saturday. There had been notices sent, she said. I had received letters. I had responded to every one of them. I had been in active communication with their modification department for 4 months. I don't understand how this happened while I was still in contact with you, I said. She said the modification process and the foreclosure process were handled by separate departments. They did not always communicate in real time. I sat with that sentence for a moment. 2 departments. Not communicating. My house, sold on a Saturday while my children played in the backyard. What are my options? I asked. The options were limited and the timeline was short. I could challenge the sale on procedural grounds if I had evidence the process was improper, but that required a lawyer, and lawyers required money I didn't have. I could attempt to negotiate with the new owner directly for more time. I could look into emergency housing assistance programs, of which there were several in Phoenix, though all had waiting lists. I called a legal aid organization that afternoon. They were patient and honest. They said my case had some procedural questions worth looking into, but that pursuing it would take time I might not have before an eviction order was filed. I went home and sat at the kitchen table with a notepad and made lists. Lists of numbers to call. Lists of programs to apply for. Lists of friends and family members who might be able to help in various ways. My mother was in Tucson. She lived in a one-bedroom apartment. She offered immediately and without hesitation, and I loved her for it, but 3 adults and 2 children in a one-bedroom apartment was not a solution. It was a last resort. I had not told the children yet. I didn't know how. Sophie was old enough to understand more than I wanted her to have to understand. Marcus was 6, he still believed that everything difficult had a quick fix, and I was not ready to take that belief away from him. So I moved through those first days in a kind of divided state. Normal at home, dinner, homework, bedtime, stories. Quietly falling apart everywhere else. I told my coworker Janet on a Friday. I hadn't planned to. We were in the break room and she asked if I was okay, just the ordinary question that coworkers ask without expecting a real answer, and I told her the truth. She listened to all of it. She didn't offer easy reassurances. She asked the right questions, how long I had, what I had already tried, who else knew. Then she said, my sister went through something similar in 2019. There's a housing advocate in Phoenix, a woman named Carol Reyes. She's not a lawyer but she knows the system. She helped my sister get 60 extra days. That was enough to find something else. She wrote the name and number on a napkin. I called Carol Reyes that same afternoon. Carol had the direct, efficient manner of someone who had helped many people in exactly this situation. She asked for all my documentation, every letter, every call log, every form I had submitted to the bank. She said she would review it over the weekend and call me Monday. She called Monday morning. The bank's process had a flaw, she said. A required notice was sent to an old address on file, not your current one. You never received it. That is a procedural issue. It doesn't guarantee you get the house back, but it gives you grounds to petition for a delay. I gripped the phone. How much of a delay? Possibly 60 to 90 days, she said. Enough time to find proper housing and potentially challenge the sale formally if you get legal representation. It wasn't the house. But it was time. I told Sophie that weekend. I waited until Marcus was in the backyard and it was just the 2 of us at the kitchen table. I kept it simple and honest. I told her that we were going to have to move. That the house had been sold by the bank and we couldn't stay. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked, where will we go? I'm working on that, I told her. I'm looking at places right now. Will Marcus and I have to change schools? I'm trying to make sure you don't, I said. That's one of the things I'm working hardest on. She looked at the table. She was 8 years old and she was processing something adult-sized with the limited but genuine emotional resources available to someone who is 8. Are you scared? She asked. I thought about telling her no. Then I thought about who I wanted to be in front of my daughter. A little, I said. But I'm also okay. Because I know what to do next, and I'm doing it. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. It was a gesture so like something a grown woman would do that I had to look away for a moment. I'll help, she said. I know, I said. You already do. Marcus came in from the backyard covered in dirt. He took one look at our faces and said, are we having a serious talk? We're done now, Sophie told him, with a calm authority that made me want to hold them both and also cry for the rest of the day. Carol filed the petition for a procedural delay on Wednesday. The new owner of the property was a real estate investment company based in Scottsdale. Carol told me these companies bought foreclosure properties in bulk and typically wanted them vacated quickly for resale or rental. They might oppose the delay, or they might not bother, depending on their volume and legal overhead. While we waited, I applied for every housing assistance program Carol identified. 3 had waiting lists of 6 months or longer. 2 had income eligibility requirements I barely met. 1, a transitional housing program specifically for families with children, had a current opening. I applied the same day. The interview was the following week. I also called my sister Beth in Tempe. Beth and I had a complicated history, not hostile, just the particular distance that forms between siblings when life pulls them in different directions for long enough. She had a 3-bedroom house and a spare room. She answered on the second ring and I told her everything. There was a pause. Then she said, "Why didn't you call me sooner?" "Because I thought I could fix it," I said. "Diane." Her voice was not unkind. "You can't fix everything alone." "I know," I said. "I'm learning that." "The room is here," she said. "For as long as you need it. Don't argue with me." I didn't argue. The delay was granted. Carol called me on a Tuesday morning with the news. 60 days. The investment company had not filed an opposition, exactly as Carol had suspected. At their scale, one contested property wasn't worth the legal cost. 60 days felt like a year compared to what I had started with. The transitional housing program offered me a spot as well, a small apartment in a stable part of Phoenix, subsidized for 12 months, with a caseworker who would help me get back to a position where I could afford private rental. The catch was the wait, it would be 4 to 6 weeks before the unit was ready. I did the math. 60 days from the grant of the delay. 4 to 6 weeks for the unit. Tight, but possible. Beth's spare room as a bridge if I needed it. For the first time in 3 weeks, the pieces had arrangements. Not certainty. Not ease. But arrangements. I drove home from Carol's office and sat in the car outside the house for a few minutes. I looked at the front door, the one we had repainted 2 summers ago, Sophie helping with a small brush, getting more paint on herself than the door. The flower beds that I had planted and mostly kept alive. The crack in the driveway that Keith had always meant to fill. This house was not going to be ours. That chapter was ending. But I sat there and I let myself feel that fully, not pushing it away, not managing it, just sitting with the fact of it until it became something I could carry instead of something carrying me. Then I went inside and made dinner. We moved out on a Saturday in March. Beth came with her van. A neighbor named Ron, who had watched the kids a few times over the years, came with his truck and his teenage son, and together we moved the important things, beds, clothes, the children's books, the kitchen box, the drawings from the refrigerator, into Beth's house in Tempe. It took 4 hours. The house looked different, empty. Smaller, somehow. Louder, the way empty spaces are loud with their own absence. Marcus walked through each room once at the end, in the serious, deliberate way he had when he was processing something. He came back to where I was standing in the kitchen and said, "We can come visit it, right? Like, drive past." "Of course," I said. "Okay," he said. And that was enough for him. Sophie helped me carry the last box to the van. She was quiet. At the end of the driveway, she turned and looked back at the house once. Then she looked at me. "We're going to be okay," she said. It was the same thing I had said to her 3 weeks earlier at the kitchen table. She had held it and now she was giving it back to me. "Yes," I said. "We are." Ron closed the back of the truck. Beth started the van. And we drove away from the house on the street where we had lived for 7 years, and I watched it in the rearview mirror until we turned the corner and it was gone. The apartment was ready 5 weeks later. We moved in on a Friday. It was smaller than the house, 2 bedrooms, a compact kitchen, a view of the parking lot. The children shared a room, which they approached with the negotiating energy of diplomats establishing a new border agreement. It was not the house with the painted door and the cracked driveway and the flower beds. But it was ours in the way that matters, the way that comes from being inside something together, building the daily texture of a life. I kept working with Carol for several months after we moved. Not for the house, that chapter was closed. But Carol connected me with a financial counselor through the same organization, and over the following year, I rebuilt the foundations that had cracked quietly underneath me while I wasn't watching. I learned things I wished I had known earlier. About how banks processed modifications and foreclosures in separate systems that didn't speak to each other. About how to read the fine print in documents I had previously trusted without fully reading. About how to ask for help before the last possible moment, before the letter in the mail, before the socks on the driveway. That last one was the hardest. Not because the knowledge was complicated, but because it required me to revise something I had believed about myself for a long time. I had believed that managing alone was the same as strength. That asking was the same as failing. It wasn't. It had never been. My mother visited us in the apartment that summer. She sat in the small living room with her cup of tea and looked around at the drawings back on the refrigerator and Marcus's shoes by the door and Sophie's books stacked on the windowsill. "You did it," she said. "We did it," I said. "I had help." She smiled. "That's the part you finally got right," she said. Sophie heard this from the kitchen and called out, "Mom's good at a lot of things. She just takes a while." My mother laughed. I laughed. And in the small apartment with the parking lot view and the refrigerator drawings and the shoes by the door, that laughter filled every room completely.